I said to mum and dad, I don't want a puppy or a kitten, I wanted a beehive.
So I got really fascinated about the engineering or the social networking that happens inside a beehive. What happens if suddenly all the bees in the world are just vanished?
That if bees disappear, humans have 4 years to live. And then basically the venom sac will get pulled out from her abdomen. It's a rich flavour, caramel, semi-pungent flavour.
Humans are a very dangerous species.
Oh, we are. We're the most dangerous. Yeah, we certainly are. I agree. I agree, my friend.
Welcome to another exciting podcast on Stories with Venky. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Ben Moore from Melbourne, Australia. Ben Moore is an apiarist, environmentalist, food lover, and owner of Ben's Bees. Being exposed to nature and farming from an early age, and with 3 decades of experience behind him, Ben started Ben's Bees in 2008. Since then, his company has expanded to include beekeeping, honey production, the safe rehoming of honeybees colonies, and wasp nest removal services and international mentoring, etc. Through these activities, Ben has built a passionate community of loyal beekeepers and from Australia and from across the globe. With a focus on ethical and natural beekeeping practices, Ben is committed to educating the community about bees and their vital connection to the environment and our everyday lives. It is fascinating, the world of bees and the equilibrium on the ecosystem. Without any further ado, let's meet him.
How are you, Mr. Ben?
Good. Thank you, Venky. Really appreciate your time and thank you so much for having me on.
So, to just quickly introduce about me, I am an adventurer. I live in India, and I have a small profile as a mountaineer. I climbed an 8,000-meter mountain, and last year I did a 12,000-kilometer cycling across the country in 104 days.
That is awesome. I watch your YouTube videos and it was brilliant. You're a fit man. You'll live a long time.
I'm trying to be a better person, strong man. Because the Indian the body types, they grow. 60 years is like old age in this country, but
Really?
in Americas and in Australia, Western or Eastern zone, Australia and New Zealand, the 60 years is not old age,
Yes,
right?
exactly. That's correct. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I'm trying to keep my body metabolism or complexion as younger as possible physically, but mind I want to be young always as a student. That's the
Love it. How old do you think I am, Venky?
you will be around 40 to 41 years old.
Oh, you're a good man. Almost 47.
Uh, okay. Yeah, because of the beard, you might look old,
I
but
know. If I shave it off, I look exactly.
yeah.
I look like a baby.
How
Sorry,
was
I
it?
interrupted you. A little bit about you. So with the mountaineering and the cycling, that's fantastic.
Yeah, these two things, and then I have a more adventures coming up in this year. Also, I have a plan to come to Australia and then do a circumnavigation around the country.
Oh wow, that'd be amazing.
But I don't know when it happens because it's a lot of budget is required. It's about money, right?
Yes,
So
yeah, it is. Yes,
and all stars, aligning all the stars is not an easy task
yeah, that's true.
on an international trip. So I'm working on it. But if it is materializing, I will definitely share you my itinerary and all the stuff.
I would love to catch up. That'd be absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic.
So tell me about yourself.
So a little bit about me. So my name's Ben. I'm from Melbourne in Australia. So it's the most southern part of Australia. We've got Tasmania, which is below. So just on the mainland. So it's the southern part. So a beekeeper, been a beekeeper for over 30 years. People ask me, how did I get into bees? That's an interesting story because when I was 14, I said to mum and dad, I don't want a puppy or a kitten. I wanted a beehive. So no brothers or sisters. So I had had my bees as my pets, and it was an absolute passion. I absolutely love what I do. Very very liquish all sorts. So now when you get a bag of mixed lollies, there's lots of different things. That's like my business. So I do things from, obviously honey, pollination, help people with bees, mentoring, selling bees. Got an online e-commerce site and do an online shop. So a little bit of everything, like those lollies, absolute mixed bag.
So actually, in many parts of India, the wasps or bee hives are just ignored. Merely, we treat it as a pest control issue, and normally these beehives are ignored. There are many everywhere around here on the window shades or on the nearby trees. Uh, we don't much actually care about it. How does it work in Australia? I saw in your website there are bee and wasp removal services. I mean, beehives and wasp removal services.
Yeah,
So what
that's interesting. That's a good question. So bees here in Australia, so there's a lot of laws. It's can be quite strict. But with bees, they have to be in a managed beehive. So they're going to be in a beehive managed. We don't have many sort of wild bees. There are wild bees there, and there's when I say not many, I believe there's over 1 million unmanaged feral hives. But Australia is a big continent. We are a very big land. It's very massive. So it's very interesting there. But it's so we do have wild hives, but it's not, you don't see them all that often. It's and usually wild hives come from a beekeeper. Their bees have swarmed and then taken off. So that's usually the case. So that's
So how did you take up this profession? Uh, what made you choose this profession as
yeah.
beekeeper?
That's a good question, Venky. So I absolutely love what I do. Absolutely love it. Because there's so many different components to bees. And if you look at a beehive, that's a very complex social structure. And you look at that, and then you look at what they produce. Obviously, look at honey. I believe honey is more of a medicine than a food as such, because pure honey is very good for you. But then you look at the other things. Look at propolis, something that bees produce, which is like a glue. For the listeners, that's propolis is Propolis, and it's amazing research. Do some research on that. We're talking scientific clinical data is amazing for making a drink, what we call a tincture, and that is really sore throats, that type of thing. Then you look at bee venom. The research in bee venom as a medicine is, once again, it's scientifically fixing things like cancers, and we're talking science here, not some sort of witchcraft or anything like that. So when you look at bees, and the reason why I got into it is I just love what I do. So many components to actually keeping bees. So I really thoroughly enjoy it. It's very hard work physically. It is very demanding mentally as well, because they're an animal. They have to be looked after. So, but yeah, that's why I love it. And especially too, probably the biggest thing is, Venky, is the people you meet. I've lucky fortunate enough to travel to many countries. I haven't been to India, but I would love to go. And I've been fortunate enough to travel to many places, and I've literally backpacked through Europe, gone through Europe, gone through Ireland, the UK, United Kingdom, stayed with beekeepers, and their stories and how they look after things and look after the beehives is very different to what we made, but we can learn from one another. So because you look at a bee, they're a very precious animal. We need them. We look at the pollination with the food, 1 in every 3 mouthfuls of food that we eat has been pollinated by a bee. So yeah, so I just love it. Everything I do, I've even got a bee tattoo. You can see I'm all rugged up here because I'm at my studio and I don't have a heater here, and it's getting cold now. We've got winter. Now when I say cold, it's not, we don't get snow here in Melbourne, but it does get cold, and I love the heat. So I want to be where you are now, Venky, because it looks beautiful and warm there.
It's summer here. It's like 44 degrees, 45 degrees going on across.
Really? Well, that's pretty hot. That's probably a little bit too hot. That's well.
It's like, this is how this country's climate. It's like, it's extreme.
Wow, really?
Because of the Himalayas.
Oh. So,
Uh,
and whereabouts in India are you, Venky? Whereabouts? Like, are you situated? Whereabouts in India do you live? Whereabouts?
I live in the western part of India, but I am from southern part of India. I am from South India.
Okay, South India. Okay, okay.
I was born and brought up in the East Coast, but now I am living in the West Coast, close to West Coast of India.
Okay, okay.
So the place where I am living is speaks a different language, but the where I was born is a different language. So we have
Wow.
28 different languages with different regions. Every 200 kilometers there is a language change, food change, dialect change. It's a diverse
Wow, that's amazing.
culture
That's
over
amazing.
here.
And I'm going to ask the question: how many languages do you speak, Venky?
I can speak three languages properly: English, Hindi, and my mother tongue Telugu.
Okay, wow, love it, beautiful, fantastic.
We have a bit of a problem with the accent while we are speaking with Australians or the UK guys because of the dialect. Yours is like how you say, "How are you doing today?" Is that's why we ask. But when I listen from Australian, "How are you doing today?" So it is
Oh,
like,
that's
what?
right, that's it.
I am not. I am not going to die today. That's what we feel.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. So how we say in Australia is "How you going, mate?" You know,
Yeah.
how you going, mate? That's how we say. But I'll try not to talk any Australian slang.
So that's the problem. Otherwise, English works in this country everywhere.
Yes.
Nowadays, it's the education or the literacy rate is also going up. So for a tourist also, it is really good coming
That's
in
awesome.
India.
That's awesome.
So recently, I also started ventured into this honey business. So I got really fascinated about the engineering or the social networking that happens inside a beehive.
Yes.
So I did my research, and this is the reason why I started the podcast talking to beekeepers across the globe. So this question rose in my mind: what happens if suddenly all the bees in the world are just vanished?
Now that's a very good question and a very interesting question. So they believe that Albert Einstein said that if bees disappear, humans have 4 years to live, because of obviously pollination with food. Um, I also read a very interesting article that says that may not necessarily be the true, but basically the landscape of what we would eat would change, because you look at some of the major crops: rice, corn, oats, barley, wheat, especially wheat. Those crops, chickpeas, they don't require bees to pollinate. So, but if you look at bees, there's roughly, I know in Australia, there's roughly 100 different fruit and vegetables at the supermarket. Of those 100, 70 of them have been pollinated by bees. So we'd lose things like, we'd lose citrus, we'd lose apples, pears, cherries, a lot of the stone fruits. We call them stone fruits, like nectarines, peaches, that type of fruit we would not eat. So we would definitely see a change, obviously, with health as well, because you look at oranges as far as the vitamin C. So it'd change. So I don't think we would collapse entirely, but people would die. That's definitely from malnutrition. So it's a very interesting one. So but it would be because we need bees, like for pollination. I know globally they're estimated to be worth about $200 billion US per year for pollination. That's rough sort of value, but that's why they're so important. I mean, things like nuts, almonds. I mean, they need to be pollinated by bees. So it'd really, really change, but it would definitely. We'd be, as humans, the human race across the globe, if they did become extinct, we would definitely have many, many challenges.
So honey is just a sugar syrup. It's a sugary type of syrup.
Yes, yes.
But how it is different from? It's a natural sweetener. What is exactly honey. What is pure honey exactly? How we define it?
Yeah, good question. So regards to pure honey, so let's look at how honey is made. So a bee will go to a flower. Now there is obviously not every single flower produces nectar, but we'll look at the Australian landscape of say eucalyptus trees. We have over 600 different species of eucalyptus. Now, when those eucalyptus trees flower, they produce nectar. The bee will then go to there and ingest some of the nectar, and they've got a special, like a crop, almost like a chicken, and that nectar will go into the bee, and then that bee will fly back to the hive, and then pass it to another bee. Now, there's two fundamentally sugars in that nectar. One of them's the highest level is the fructose content, which is basically fruit sugar. Because we've got sugars in many things. We've got in wheat, there's sugar called dextrose. In milk, dairy products, it's called lactose. Then we've got sucrose in cane sugar. We've got glucose. But primarily the sugar is fructose. Now that fructose levels, now there is also a small amount of naturally occurring sucrose in there, in that nectar. The bee then flies to the hive, passes it to another bee. Now, because they've got enzymes like us, all animals have enzymes in their stomach. It's not to be confused with a digestive stomach, because that's how they digest food. But they've got this secondary, what we call a crop, as I said before, like a chicken, that gets passed. So these enzymes, and then this nectar is put into basically the honeycomb cells, these little cells, that hexagonal shape. And then that's interesting that the bees will then dehydrate the moisture content down to around about 20% moisture. They'll dehydrate that down. And then because of these enzymes in this chemical change, that most of that sucrose will disappear, and that gets converted into glucose. And then we've still got the fructose, and we've got the glucose. That with the high levels of sugars, low moisture content, and also on the pH scale. So that's we look at pH. That's like acidity's below 7. 7 is neutral, and anything above 7 to 14 is alkaline. Now the honey is always on the acidic range. And then because of that, that's where honey won't spoil. It'll last forever. Now, depending where the nutritional components come in, depends on what those bees are foraged on. So now the classic one that we all have heard of is Manuka honey. Now it comes from a specific tea tree called the Leptospermum scorparium. So it's a small tree, or more like a shrub than anything. And when that flowers, it has this ingredient in it called DHA. And the bees, basically, that DHA gets converted within the honey into MgO, which is methylglyoxal. Now, that methylglyoxal is basically this almost like a miracle ingredient, where it is antibacterial, antifungal, and we can use that for, once again, sore throats. They're using honey now in Australia in hospitals, and they're calling it Medi honey. So it's absolutely incredible ingredient. So now the problem is, you asked the question, what's pure honey? Well, that's coming, from the flowers. The bees do all the work. It's dehydrated down to that 20%. And as beekeepers, we can obviously harvest the surplus honey. But what is pure honey? Because the problem is with honey, it's one of the most fraudulent food items in the world. So we can actually feed the bees sugar, like sucrose, and they mix it with the nectar. And that's what happens in a lot of countries. And that's why it's important that we know where our bees have come from, what they're foraged on, and more importantly, they haven't been fed any sugar. Because you look at honey, it's very sweet, as you mentioned before, Venky. It's a very sweet sweetener. So adding 10%, 20% sugar, a lot of people wouldn't know. So that's why it's important that we know the source of where the honey comes from. And as I said, as a medicine, they've been using it for thousands of years, honey, for medicine. As I said, people like with IBS, which stands for irritable bowel syndrome with bad stomachs. Honey is a natural prebiotic. So obviously we've got probiotics, which we all know as yogurt. And my favorite drink from India is called a mango lassi. Absolutely love that. Absolutely one of my favorite drinks. And I got to also say, sorry, I'm digressing, but Indian food is absolutely amazing. The complexities and the different spices of foods is in India is, as I said, I'd love to travel because the cuisine in India is so vibrant and flavorful. You know what I mean? It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, so we look at honey. So that's a natural medicine is what I call it, and that's why it's important to know where your honey comes from, no matter where in the world, because and if you can buy it, ideally directly from the beekeeper is always the best, because it's not going from beekeeper to another place to somewhere else. It gets changed. It goes to all these different places and then ends up in the supermarket. And there's beekeepers across the world, beekeepers India, everywhere. It can be Norway, Scandinavia. So it's very very important if you're buying honey to just know where it comes from, because it's really, really good for you as well. I think that's what another thing is too. There's some statistics out there that beekeepers are the longest lived of any profession. The longest lived. So beekeepers always have honey. We love honey. I could probably eat too much honey, but it's honey is really good. And I think there's something very magical. Honey is a very magical ingredient.
So I'll tell you how honey is used in India.
Yeah, please. Yes.
So in India, honey is part of our day-to-day life. Now the present day situation is different, but if we talk the traditional or a century ago or 60 years ago, before British invaded this country, especially in the Himalayas, I can explain more about the honey in Himalayas because I did my research over there. It is more or less the same in the rest of the places, but Himalayan mountains, it's a cold area, very cold. Like the temperature goes from, sometimes in the winters it goes -15, -20 degrees in at 2000 meters altitude or 2500 meters altitude, something like that. So the native Indian bee species is called Apis cerana, and it's called Southeast Asian or Asiatic honeybee, Apis cerana. The farmers, they go to forests and then they find these hives, and they carry a basket, a long basket. They keep it upside down, so they actually rehome these beehives into this basket. This basket is covered with cow dung, actually plastered with cow dung, and then they send these bees inside with the hive, along with the hive. They go to forest. Sometimes they find in apple orchards or in apricot orchards, somewhere, anywhere in the farming area. And then they have a specific type of wood. It's called shakao. It's a local name. Shakao is a local name of that wood. This wood, it's a box. Carpenter will carve it into a hollow box, and then outside they make a door with the same type of wood. So they keep this. They bring these honeybees from the forest, and then they keep it inside. They put all these honeybees inside that box, close it, and then seal with cow dung. Keep it in a place close to their home. It's a wooden home. So, and they extract honey only 2 times a year. One is in June, which is the spring season, and then spring in India, it's like post nearly summer. It's called summer honey. Yeah. And then one is in November, where after the fall. So during the summer, you have plenty of pollen around here: apple orchards, apricots, plums, marigolds, everywhere, and the lowlands. But once the summer is over, after post rainy season in November, it's before the fall, there is no pollen around the bee the habitats. So they fly higher, and they fly higher. If we are talking about Himalayas, the altitudes are crazy, 6,000 meters, 4,000 meters, but we don't find much in 6,000 meters area. But there is a line called juniper line around 3,500 meters. In fall season, you will find small primula flowers, some kind of marigolds above that zone, above 3000 meters. So they get pollen from there. That's why honey in winter or November, post rainy season, in the fall season, it is really thick, dark, and then highly medicinal.
Yeah, wow.
So Himalayas, these farmers, even they are poor. There is no malnutrition over there because of the original, pure, fantastic, best honey in the world.
Yes.
And they also produce dairy. They have cows, and the milk
Yes.
they get is extraordinary. So this is, and this honey is used as an alternate medicine in those areas, and then it is continuing till now, but it is endangered now because of the progress, advancements in this one. So people are trying to produce more honey quickly, and then we have a new type of bee called mellifera nowadays, which produces honey faster in 45 days. So these are the things. But in the in the Himalayas, the honey is fantastic.
Yeah, wow.
So this is very simple process. The bee, the honey harvesting is also like more or less the same, but depending on the what kind of wood they get in the forest, and then the flavor of the honey differs. It's like more or less like multifloral honey. It's not monofloral honey.
Yeah, okay, multifold. And question, Venky, excuse me, is is that honey consumed like straight, like a medicine, or is it used in cooking or in preparation of things?
Yeah, it can be used. Normally, winter honey is used as a medicine. They keep it, and the locals say it won't spoil for 100 years or more. It never spoils.
Yes, okay.
It's a similar in summer honey.
Yes.
Mainly, this honey is used for there because it's cold area. They use it for throat. It's like fantastic medicine, gut problems, throat problems, and if there are any wounds, they apply for wounds.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is the thing. So it's precious, actually. It's very.
Oh, it is precious. Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. That's I would love to go there. I can imagine the views would be spectacular. Absolutely fantastic, spectacular.
How it works in Australia? Seasonal differences and
yeah. So obviously Australia, we're very different. We can have, areas where there's mountainous regions where there's snow as well, but then we can get into the top of Australia where it's very tropical, like very hot. So we can have this sort of there's really wet season, dry season, and then we go south to the south of Australia, and it's we've got those classic 4 seasons, summer, autumn, winter, and spring. So it can really change. Now, as far as beekeepers go, is we can move our bees. So we move our bees. Generally, there's variables there. Some beekeepers will drive 6 hours to different regions, and then obviously put their hives on trucks, put their hives down, and then a certain type of flower will be flowering. Because, as I said, we've got so many different types of eucalyptus. The Australian bush, Australian country, we've got so many, plants and trees and flowers, which the bees absolutely love, and the bees do so well. We've got an area where we call it the Mallee. So it's like you wouldn't call it a desert, but it's semi-arid, semi-desert, and it looks like a eucalyptus tree, and it doesn't grow as tall as some of the tallest ones. And that Mallee honey produces. So the Mallee flowers produces Mallee honey, which is absolutely incredible. The flavors and so forth, absolutely amazing. So we can get very specific. We call them monofloral crops, but you can go to sort of semi-mountainous regions, and we get different stringy barks, which is like the honey you mentioned before, very dark and very thick, and so forth. So then we've got other crops, certain crops like oranges. We get an orange blossom honey, which is obviously very fragrant of oranges. Chestnuts is another one. So and then we get these other particular shrubs, trees. There's one where it's almost like looks like a fat sort of, what we call it, a cob. And this particular tree plant is called a banksia. And the bees, it's incredible. The honey's like almost like a caramel toffee type flavors. So as beekeepers, we can move our hives. I have some bees in the very country sort of area, but then a lot of my bees are in more urban environments in and around Melbourne. So I'm getting these very multi-floral type crops where I don't move my bees, allow them to behave naturally, and harvest that honey from them. And it's beautiful honey in every season, every year. It's the same, very similar, probably 2 times a year. It's a very classic with beekeepers, because it takes a long time for the bees. I think it's 12 bees. Their whole life to make half a teaspoon of honey. So it takes quite some time. But yeah, so we can do that. And then there's actually now, Venky, there's an accreditation for a honey sommelier. So sommelier is someone who specializes in wine. So a sommelier, go to a fancy restaurant and, you swirl the wine and smell the wine. Well, it's the same now with honey, you know what I mean? So because of the complexities of honey is absolutely phenomenal. So the bees do really, really well here. Where I am, we sort of closed down a little bit now. Now's my quiet time. When I say quieter, not as crazy busy as like spring. Getting ready for the spring season, making boxes and frames and things. But yeah, then we can harvest that honey, and jar that honey, and it's a perfect time. Just before in autumn, we do the last one. Usually, as you said, spring and an autumn crops. Usually, sometimes beekeepers, and we use the Apis mellifera, the European honeybee. But a commercial beekeeper, I don't keep bees for honey. I produce honey, but I don't keep that like bees specifically for honey. But beekeepers, I know they work on 100 kilograms of honey per hive per year, which is amazing amount. So the diversity is incredible for us. Once again, it's a big country. So a lot of beekeepers in New South Wales. So we've got Victoria, we've got Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, and then we've got Northern Territory, South Australia, and then Western Australia is in the west. But to drive it takes a long time. But there's a lot of beekeepers in New South Wales region because it's the perfect. It's not overly hot, not overly cold when we look at more coastal areas. So it's a lot of beekeepers. Most of our beekeepers are based in New South Wales.
So monofloral honey and multifloral, polyfloral or regular honey, what is the difference? Do we feel the taste?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, good question. So we can, with the monofloral honey, we can target these eucalyptus species, and we've got so many. So we can have, like, I'll give you 2 examples. One is Eucalyptus obliqua, and Eucalyptus obliqua, which we know as messmate. The common name is messmate eucalyptus. That produces a very dark, sort of rich, almost malty flavor honey. That's sort of like a malt, almost like molasses. Probably not as strong as molasses, more fragrant. And then we get the spotted gum, and the spotted gum, the spotted eucalyptus is the opposite. It's very light, very, very strong, but very full of flavor, very punchy on the palate. It doesn't burn, but it's got these really flavors. So these really light and dark honeys, and in the Australian bush, and then we can certain areas we get like more of a mixture. I mean, we can have different types of eucalyptus flowering, so we get these almost like these natural occurring blends in with the honey. So it can be very, very different. So nutritionally speaking, they've all, they're very nutritious. It's a natural food, but we can start. Some people might prefer a specific type of eucalyptus. Red gum is another species of eucalyptus, which is a big tree, and the red gum is a very iconic, flavor. It's what we call, I wouldn't necessarily say a table honey, but it's that common honey, and it's a beautiful, beautiful flavor. Really, really nice.
So here, queen bees, worker bees, and drones.
Yes.
What exactly happens in a hive?
Yeah, so in a hive, so very fascinating social creatures. So we have the queen inside a hive. That's the queen bee. Now the queen bee is not the boss. A lot of people think, oh, the queen's the boss, but she's not the boss. But she's merely an egg laying machine. Under ideal conditions, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day, which is a massive amount. So she's not the boss. Her brain is actually smaller than a worker bee. Then we've got the workers. Usually there can be tens of thousands of workers, which are a female, but more of they're, I wouldn't say sterile because they can lay eggs, but those eggs are actually, which I'll talk about in a second. But those, if there's no queen, which is an interesting thing that they do, which I'll come to. Then we've got drones. So they're drones. They don't sting. They're the boy bees. They're not the kings. A lot of people think they're the king bee, but they're only for reproduction. So we have these very complex creatures, very hygienic creatures as well, and they clean. They've all assigned a job, and there's the Bee movie, which is actually really well done. Is the Bee movie got Jerry Seinfeld talking, and that was well done because how they've all got guard bees, you got the soldiers, you've got the workers, and the workers have got cleaners and all these things. So they all work together because they're all working for the greater good, because they're working for the colony. They're not working for each other, for themselves. They're working for the colony. And but what's an interesting thing is, let's say the queen bee, if something happens to her, they'll produce more queens. They'll produce, there's variables there, but we'll say a dozen queens. That first queen that hatches will kill all her sisters, and then she'll be the victorious queen. She'll then go on a mating flight, mate with the drones, come back to the hive, and then she'll stay in and start laying eggs. But interesting, very interesting, that if let's say that queen is killed, and then there's no queens during time, the colony becomes queenless, so they can't produce one because they need a fertile egg. Some of the workers will actually lay some eggs, and they'll lay, and those eggs will turn into drones, right? Because they're an infertile egg, and it's very fascinating because if you think about it, the colony is going to die. We don't have a reproductive queen, but some of these drones, their genetic fight for survival is absolutely miraculous, because that drone can fly and mate with a queen. The colony may die, but the genetics won't. And I find that absolutely fascinating when you look at these very, very complex social creatures. So, and they all work for the greater good.
So if the queen bee dies, the colony exists. It can regenerate.
Yes, yeah. So if everything goes smoothly, the queen dies. I'll produce a new one. That queen is successful. That colony will do the same thing. And then every spring, what they'll do is their way of also reproduction is by swarming. So that's where the old queen and roughly 30-40% of those workers take off, and we get this what we call a swarm. And then the original colony will produce a new queen, and that old queen with some of the workers will find a new home to set up to create another colony. So that's their other way of reproduction. We've got reproduction in the sense of within inside the hive, but then we've got reproduction is by division, by separating, and that's how they fight for their survival.
And what is the effect of seasons or rainy season, fall season on the bee colonies? How they thrive with seasons?
Yes. That was interesting. I spent some time with some beekeepers in Fiji, and Fiji is a very tropical island. And so there we've got wet season, dry season. So the wet season is usually very similar to our winter. Now the bees will fly; it's warm enough to fly, but they will slow down a little bit because they can't actively forage, and they can't get as much nectar because there's too much rain. So they'll slow down a bit. So even though the European honeybees, they successfully keep them in these tropical environments.
How do they get food in those
Oh, okay,
times?
yes, yeah. So some beekeepers will feed them sugar to keep them alive, but this is a very important fact and something important to know. That bees produce honey for themselves. They don't produce it for humans, but they're the only animal to produce a surplus to their needs. So they'll produce more than they actually need. So it's important as beekeepers that we leave plenty of honey on for them, because they use that honey to thermoregulate the temperature. So inside a beehive, no matter where it is in the world, is always 34 degrees Celsius. And then they ingest that honey, and basically what that does is creates metabolic heat in the form of energy. They use their wing muscles to vibrate. So to that, and that creates heat. So that's why they need to store the honey to get through winter. They're typically European. So obviously got to warm themselves up. But bees will obviously produce a surplus to their needs. So that's why it's important that beekeepers leave honey on for them. Plenty of honey. They're going to have lots of honey for them so they can get through winter or, that wet season, as you mentioned, Venky, so they can actually get through that time because they need honey, their carbohydrates, their sugars for them.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Rather than feeding sugar, feeding honey itself is the best practice, I
100%.
think.
Exactly, yeah, because sugar, there's no nutritional value in sugar, where there's plenty of nutrition in honey. So that's where, if we've got to feed the bees, sometimes it's life or death for a colony, and they have to be fed sugar to keep them alive, and that is very important. But if we don't have to, allowing that honey for them, your bees are stronger, healthier, and so much better, those colonies.
Yeah, they don't suffer, right? That's ethical also.
Ethical, spot on.
And do they fly away?
Yeah. So it's
What are the challenges actually? What are the challenges you face in this business? I mean, in
yes,
this
yes.
big.
So regards to keeping bees, whether you're a hobbyist, sort of recreational beekeeper, or a commercial beekeeper, probably the biggest challenges are pests and diseases. So there's plenty of things. There's a bird here in Australia. I believe it's in Southeast Asia as well, called the rainbow bee eater. It's a bird, beautiful bird, absolutely. It's the feathers are like the rainbow, but that eats bees. You got those. You got frogs, what we call a cane toad, will eat them. But then we've got these other things that the bees get bacterial infections. They get fungal infections. One's called chalk brood. You've got viral issues with viruses. There's deformed wing virus. So the bees get all these different challenges, but generally it's like us. Is if we're a bit run down, we've got our environment's not the best, we're more likely to get a disease. But if we're fit, healthy, and so forth, genetics play a part in it. Having good genetics of bees, you know what I mean? So they're not they've got really good hygiene, what we call hygienic behavior. So they can often do well themselves. We now in Australia have this parasitic mite called Varroa destructor, which is like a flea, and that it bites the bees. It looks almost like a crab with 8 legs, and it bites the bees, and that transmits viruses and diseases, compromises the bees' health and life and so forth. So plenty of challenges there. But when you look at things like chalk brood, it's a fungal infection, so it looks like kills the larvae of the bees. It can be environmental too, if it's sort of really humid type environments. But then nutrition, if the bees are suffering because they're not on a very poor quality crop of nectar and pollen, they're more likely to get these problems. So yeah, plenty of challenges with that. But for me, I put my bees first. So my bees always get really well looked after, and make sure if I've got to move them to a better crop, you know what I mean, to a better place. Yeah, I'll move them, and the bees, they'll pick up.
So what is bee food here? I saw another part, bee food, other than sugar.
Yeah, bee food. So they use it a lot in more Europe. So bee food there's a what you can do is you can make what we call a fondant. Fondant is typically used for icing a cake, but you can make a recipe where it's made for the bees, and that's fundamentally a super saturation of sugars, glucose and sucrose, and it doesn't go off, because if you look at sugar syrup, because there's a high amount of moisture, high amount of water, it can ferment, and bees they can't digest synthesized alcohol, so they so during winter some people will give their bees this fondant so they can actually consume that and just gnaw away at that, and it's usually only if it's more of a resort to save the colony. So we've got to save the colony, that we will feed them this bee food. The other times is pollen. So we can have these. There's a particular eucalyptus tree called the grey box. It's a grey box, and that's high amounts of nectar, but the nutritional qualities of the pollen are very low, very low. So some beekeepers, I don't go to this particular tree, but some beekeepers will feed them a pollen supplement, because I mentioned before about why bees produce honey, but they also collect pollen. Now, pollen, the easiest way, it's like their steak, it's like their chicken, their chicken tikka masala is their chicken curry is basically, so they need that to actually produce royal jelly. So they've got these glands in behind their mouths, and they produce this milk is probably the easiest way to describe it, and they need the pollen. So if you're got an imbalance of nutrition, like us, if we just ate McDonald's Big Macs all the time, we're missing out on these other essential vitamins, minerals. And it's the same with the bees. So sometimes as beekeepers, we have to supplementary feed them, so to give them a little bit extra of something in those times when they don't have it. Beekeepers all got different recipes and different ideas on what to feed them and so forth.
And what are the other products? Royal jelly is one. Royal jelly is produced by the queen bee, right?
No. So that's fed to the queen bee. So the royal jelly is, so all the bees get royal jelly. So they all get this milk from the farinal glands, and it's like this milky type substance. They give the larvae, and the larvae consume this milk. But the queens, when they're producing queens, they give the royal jelly as this more richer excess amount of royal jelly. So they give this really strong solution of milk, and that's incredibly a lot of research is going into that for royal jelly, because it's got some amazing properties inside this royal jelly. And as beekeepers, you can harvest that and collect that royal jelly. Very more common in like Asian type medicines, like Chinese practices will use royal jelly. I've heard people been through cancer treatment, having chemotherapy, and having royal jelly to help boost their immune system. People going through IVF to conceive a child, it helps their body immune system, whether they're a man or a woman. So there's some really amazing research is going into royal jelly.
And beeswax, where beeswax is used? What is beeswax?
Yeah. So what is beeswax? So bees produce their wax to help produce their home. So we call that their foundation. They produce these cells that's got that hexagonal shape. That could be for the honey, could be to store the pollen, but just as importantly, so the the queen can lay an egg in there, and that can go through metamorphosis. So so the metamorphosis is that change with insects. Egg, pupae, egg, larvae, pupae, and then the adult bee. But the bees have 4 pairs of glands underneath their abdomen, and that excretes the wax, and they use that wax within their hive. Now, once again, as beekeepers, we can harvest the beeswax. Now, beeswax have been used for thousands of years. The Egyptian mummies used to use that to help embalm, the dead. Then World War One, they used to coat the bullets in beeswax. So as it went through the rifling of a gun, it'd shoot straight up. And also, too, we know beeswax as far as candles, making a beeswax candle, because they smell beautiful. Having a beautiful burning beeswax candle, where a lot of candles these days are these soy-based candles. They may smell nice because they're very fragrant and the smell of, lemongrass or rose hip or something like that. But the problem is they can put in there, a lot of these candles, what's called paraffin wax. Now, paraffin wax is a byproduct of petroleum. Now, if you're burning this candle, it's like burning your car inside your house, where beeswax burns pure, it burns clean, and it's beautifully fragrant. So beeswax is a very product. We use it in cosmetics too, for face creams, lip balms, that type of thing, hand moisturizers. Using a small percentage of beeswax is really good for those things.
And nowadays it's like pesticides. What is the effect of pesticides on bees, and then how it affects beekeepers, the quality of the product?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Venky, because when it comes to pesticides killing bees, it's not necessarily the chemical that kills the bees, it's how that chemical is applied. So there's some nasty chemicals out there, pesticides and things, but there's also nasty pests that attack various fruit trees. So I've never had an issue ever with pesticides, never lost any bees to pesticides, but I have a great relationship with farmers. So if they were to use something, they're not going to use it when the bees are there. So if you don't use a pesticide and the trees are in flower, it's going to be fine. It's usually, there was about 6 months ago, I had a client of mine, his hive, he had one hive, and that died from pesticide poisoning because there was a crop of maize, corn, and they had aerial spraying, and his hive was close by, and that obviously his hive died. It was affected by that. So pesticides are an interesting one. In an ideal world, we wouldn't want to use pesticides on our food, but where the world is expanding and growing and so forth, and sometimes we get these nasty pests, these aphids and beetles and mites, which actually attack crops. But I've never had a problem with them. But I think it's having a good relationship with the farmer, and being the farmer, also the community. Community know that we've got bees there. They're a precious insect. If we're going to spray a toxic chemical, let the beekeeper know. But it's never happened to me.
That's good. And is there any simple, easy technique to find it's a pure honey or adulterated honey?
I know that's an interesting one. I've heard that you can put some honey in water and swirl it around and it creates a hexagonal. To be honest, I've not tried that. I've heard of other things, putting it in warm water, which I have tried. You put honey in warm water and then honey that's pure honey, and you've got honey that's got sugar in it. Warm water, the sugar will dissolve, so it completely dissolve. I wouldn't say I'm skeptical, but I'm not convinced that necessarily will work. But I think the important thing is buying your honey from the beekeeper, no matter where in the world you are. Buy your honey from the beekeeper and ask, is there any cane sugar or high fructose corn syrup in the honey? Now, beekeepers are going to be honest. They're going to be honest and tell you, because there's a lot of testing that can be done by lab tests that can be done all around the world. There's laboratories which will test the honey, and they can actually test for it if it's got it. But I think having a good relationship with the beekeeper, and then and they're going to be truthful. They're going to be truthful.
I would like to know about your bee farm, like, so how you operate, how many
yes.
boxes you keep.
Yes, yeah. So I've got quite a few hundred hives, but what I do is I got most of mine are on private farms. So I could be driving somewhere, and it might be in the country. I'm driving, and I might see a farmer driving his tractor. He's driving his tractor and doing something. I'll go in. I'll introduce myself. I'll give him a jar of honey. I actually don't have any on the shelf here, but I'll do. I've always got jars of honey here. I'll say, hello, Mr. Farmer. Here's a jar of honey. My name is Ben. I keep bees. Could I put bees here? Is there a place? And and I got lots of sites everywhere in Victoria, and I've never had a farmer say no. Farmers always say yes, and I just say, I respect your property. It's your property. Is there a gate I can get into? No hazards. No. Cows and things like that. Even some properties I got cows. I use a solar powered electric fence around the hive so the cows don't knock them over, or other livestock, could be sheep or alpacas are quite popular here now. And I have these areas. So that's how I find my properties. A lot of, once again, honey is not my target as long as my bees are happy and healthy. But there's also commercial beekeepers that get what we call these government apiary sites. So they pay a small fee, I think it's $100, $200 a year, and it's like national parks. So it's government property, and then the beekeeper can use that government land for their bees. But I find, just finding farmers and talking, or sometimes a letterbox. I might put see a letterbox. Oh, there's no houses around. I can't see the farmer. I might not be home. I'll put a jar of honey and write a note. Hello, Mr. Farmer. I'm looking for a spot. Give me a call. Now, give me a buzz. And I want to see if I can put the bees there. And that's how I do it. And it works a treat. It works really, really good.
That's really nice. It's a good approach. It helps farmer also, right? The yield
Yeah,
increases.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, interesting, Venky. This was a couple of years now. We've all got Facebook, and I put on a community page, a Facebook. Hi, my name's Ben. I'm looking for a place to put bees. If you've got a big property, big land where I can bring my bees. Fair income. 1 hour later, I had to delete the post. I had over 80 messages. Phone was going crazy. Yeah, I've got a place to put bees. Please bring your bees here. Come and meet us. Oh, it was unbelievable. Just on Facebook, just in a local community page.
Yeah. And I think almost all my questions are over. But 2 more topics are there. One is Manuka honey.
Yes.
It is Manuka honey originates from New Zealand.
Yes or no? That's a good question. So I'll answer that one. So Manuka honey is it is a New Zealand word, Manuka honey. But I think it was last year, 2020, might have been the year before, 2021 or 2022. The Kiwi, we call them Kiwis. The Kiwis. So that's like an Aussie slang. New Zealand, the Kiwis, they wanted to trademark the name because interesting. They're very smart. The people from New Zealand, because do you know what a Chinese gooseberry is, Venky? A Chinese gooseberry.
I know Indian gooseberry. That's the highest nutrient.
Yes.
Fruit, not fruit. I don't know. It's a fruit or a vegetable. It's a very good one.
It is, yeah, very good, very, very good. So there's the Chinese gooseberry, but many, I think, decades ago, we call them kiwi fruit. And if you asked anyone, where does a kiwi fruit come from? Everyone will say New Zealand. Everyone says New Zealand, but its proper name is a Chinese gooseberry. Now, our word in Australia for Manuka honey is called jelly bush honey. Jelly bush. And now that doesn't no one's heard that jellybush honey, but everyone's heard Manuka honey. So there's a bit of what we call argy-bargy, so a bit of a squabble between like the cricket, you know what I mean, the cricket with and the rugby and the football between Australia and New Zealand, because they wanted to trademark that name. So the Aussies, Australians couldn't use it. So a lot of it went to the high courts in London and trying to trademark it. But there was a lot of information there because how we actually won. We're allowed to call it Manuka honey because in New Zealand they've got one type of Manuka tree, and it's the Leptospermum scorparium. In Australia, we've got over like 70 of these particular trees. We've got, Eucalyptus scorparium. We've got Leptospermum scorparium, Leptospermum continenale, and there's all these. And there was some DNA profiling done, and it looks like it originated from Tasmania when, tens of thousands of years ago, Australia was connected to New Zealand, and we broke off and so forth. So we're allowed to call it Manuka honey, which is very interesting. But another interesting point is and I'm not just saying this is, once again, it's the dieters that are on the internet. Australia does produce the best Manuka honey because our highest range of MGO is almost twice that of the highest range in New Zealand. So we've got an MGO content of, I think the highest is about 2,000 MGO. Now that goes for a crazy amount of money. It's something, $1,000+ a kilo. You can imagine to buy a jar like that could be $300-$400. But that's double the highest range in New Zealand. I think the highest in New Zealand is 1,000, 1,200 MGO. So yeah, very interesting. But we love it. We love our neighbours, the Kiwis, the New Zealanders. So we do love them.
So because it's quite expensive, and it says Manuka honey is the best, very MGO component, methyl glycol and all that stuff. So I got a bit fascinated about the Manuka honey also.
It is, yeah, really interesting. The research on that, as I said, they're using hospitals. It's fixing.
There is the difference between difference in tastes for the Manuka honey and then regular honey.
Oh yeah, Manuka honey is very. It's a rich flavor. It's a very almost like a caramel, semi-pungent flavor. You're not going to make it necessarily a cup of tea and put Manuka honey in it. You wouldn't anyway, because the hot water will kill the good qualities of the Manuka honey. It's very strong honey, so it's very strong. It's a flavor like really strong. So as a medicine, it is more like a neutral type flavor.
And then, did you ever taste mad honey?
Mad honey, I certainly have. I have some mad honey here at my factory from the rhododendrons. I know there's a beekeeper many years ago I spoke to near the Himalayas who collects the mad honey, and oh geez, that was expensive. I think he sent me a free jar, but he did say I think a jar like this sort of size was about $120. And I tried just a little bit. I just put my finger in, whoop, and just tried a little bit to try because I don't want to go, because I've seen videos of people eating too much of it, and they're all spaced out and feeling. But it's there's the interesting thing. It's it's called greonotoxin. Is the medicinal qualities having small levels of this mad honey is really good for you. Once again, as you said, they use it in the Himalayas for medicine, which is fantastic.
Does it really create that hallucinative?
Oh no, I was too scared. I was too scared to have too much of it because I just a little taste. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go because I've got to work and I'm driving my car or my truck. I can't be spaced out. You know what I mean? Have an accident. So I did try it and I did get any effects. But I've heard you got to have 1 or 2 tablespoons, like a large amount, and I think then you can You know what I mean? See all sorts of crazy things. Yeah.
In my research, I got to know that only two places in the world you will find mad honey. But one is in Turkey and one is in the Himalayan region,
Yeah.
some parts of Himalaya. Even in India, there is Sikkim and all. You will find mad honey hives high up in the altitudes.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I'd love to see
And
it because
it's quite
good to
expensive.
see. Yeah, very expensive. Very expensive.
Mm. And yeah, I think these are the things I just want to. I think I might have missed many points, but it's an interesting discussion with you, Mr. Moore.
Oh no, thank you. No, I appreciate you having me on. Like, it's an absolute privilege, and yeah, I could talk about bees for hours, and we're just like, look at all these tiny little components of bees, but they really are, they're using one. We'll finish off on one thing, but they're using beehives now for people with mental health problems. Now, when having a beehive, you can just stop and just look at your bees. They're flying backwards and forwards, doing their thing. And when you give the bees some smoke and open up the beehive, you're not thinking about anything else. So they're starting to put bees in prisons for various mental health sort of organizations and people. So they really, as I've said many times, they are a very miracle creature.
And just one question about bee venom. Is it poisonous? If a bee bites us,
Yes.
is it dangerous, like deathly dangerous?
Yeah, it can be. So with bee stings is so it's called apitoxin. Now with some people, I think it's about 2%. Don't quote me on that. 2% of the population are what we call highly allergic or anaphylactic to bee stings. But most people, it hurts. It'll swell up. We'll get this swelling, and that's a normal reaction. But yeah, but it's not everyone's. It's only a small percentage of the world's population are anaphylactic to bee venom.
And there is one more thing. Sometimes some bees, if they sting, they die. Is it real?
Yes, yeah. So I know I'm more specialised in Apis mellifera, the European honeybee. So when they sting, so a bee can sting another insect, like a bee can sting a wasp and not die. But it's when a bee stings a mammal, we're mammals, a human, it could be a bear, it could be a dog. That sting gets stuck in the epidermal layers, and then basically the venom sac will get pulled out from her abdomen, the bee's abdomen, and then she will die. That's right, she will die.
Humans are very dangerous species.
Oh, we are. We're the most dangerous. Yeah, we certainly are. I agree, my friend.
Mm. So it's lovely talking to you. It's thanks a lot for the support, and thanks a lot for the lot of fantastic knowledge sharing.
No, I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been an absolute a privilege and an absolute pleasure, Venky, so having me on. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben, for sharing such a valuable information about beekeeping and the crucial role of bees in our everyday lives. Your dedication to education and quality in beekeeping are truly inspiring. For those who are interested to learn more about beekeeping and ethical honey production practices, please check out for Ben's piece. The details are given in the description section. Thanks again, Ben, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Stay tuned for more exciting podcasts. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.